After the last message left Earth's dying orbit, silence swallowed the stars. The transmission had been short, sharp, and final. We offered peace. Now you'll witness our resolve. No signature, no fleet designation, no plea for help. Just those words repeated on every known frequency until the signal faded into static. Across the galaxy, the Kvor Alliance celebrated. Humanity, that fragile, loud, chaotic species, was finally gone. Their cities were ash, their ships were scrap, and their sun was quiet. But not everything on Earth had burned. Deep in the fractured rings of Helios 9, a dead gas giant long abandoned by miners and scavengers, something stirred. It was not a warship, not a beacon, not even a proper vessel by most standards. It was a relic, patched together from old freighter hulls, salvaged solar sails, and parts stamped with faded logos. Inside, the air smelled of ozone, dried herbs, and warm metal. In the dim glow of emergency lights, a woman sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, hands resting on her knees. Her name was Lila Cross. She did not look like the humans the Kvor remembered. Her skin was pale, almost luminous, stretched over sharp bones. Her hair, the color of storm clouds, fell past her shoulders in loose waves, and her ears, tapered slightly at the tips, twitched at the faintest hum of the ship's systems. She was not entirely human, though she carried humanity's blood in her veins. She was veiled, one of the last descendants of an ancient offshoot that had hidden among humans for centuries. Mistaken for myth, for fantasy, for fever dreams, curled against her side, breathing slow and steady, was Ember. He was no bigger than a large dog, but his scales shimmered like molten copper under the low light. His wings, folded tight against his back, bore scars from battles fought in places no human had ever seen. His eyes, when open, held galaxies, but now he slept, his tail wrapped loosely around Lila's ankle like an anchor. The ship shuddered. A proximity alert blinked red on the main console. Lila opened her eyes. They were silver, not gray, not blue. Silver, like liquid mercury catching moonlight. She rose without a word, bare feet silent on the cold metal floor. Ember stirred but did not wake. He trusted her. He always had. On the view screen, 3 shapes emerged from the ring debris, jagged insect-like, painted in the dull green of Kvor's scavenger class. They moved with the lazy confidence of predators who believed their prey extinct. Layla watched them for a long moment, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Then she tapped a sequence into the console. The ship's outer panel shifted, revealing hidden emitters. A low hum filled the cabin, vibrating through the walls, through the floor, through her bones. The scavengers slowed. Their comms crackled with confusion. One of them broadcast a standard hail in broken standard. Identify yourself. Surrender or be destroyed. Lila did not respond. Instead, she reached down and placed a hand on Ember's head. The dragon opened one eye, then the other. He rose smoothly, stretching his wings with a sound like tearing silk. He looked at her and she nodded once. Outside, the scavenger ships drifted closer, their weapons powered up, glowing faintly at the joints. But before they could fire, Ember leapt onto the observation ledge, pressed his snout against the reinforced glass, and exhaled, not fire sound a single, pure tone that rolled through space like a wave through water. It was not loud, not destructive, but it was wrong. It bent light. It twisted signals. It made the scavenger system stutter, glitch, reboot. One ship spun wildly, its thrusters firing in all directions. Another went dark entirely. The third tried to flee, but its navigation failed. It drifted, helpless, caught in the resonance. Lila watched them, unmoved. This was not mercy. It was warning. She turned away from the screen and walked to the rear of the ship, where a sealed compartment held the last piece of Earth she had managed to save. Not a weapon. Not a data core. A small wooden box, scorched at the edges, lined with velvet. Inside lay a child's drawing, crayon on yellowed paper. A stick figure with long hair holding hands with a red dragon under a smiling sun. On the back, in shaky letters, it read, "For Lila. Love, Maya." She closed the box gently and returned to the cockpit. Ember had settled back down, but his eyes stayed open, watching the drifting ships. Lila sat beside him and placed a hand on his spine. Warmth radiated from his scales, steady and alive. She knew the Kvor would not stop. They never did. They saw weakness in silence, in retreat, in grief. They did not understand that sometimes silence was the calm before the storm. That retreat was not surrender, but preparation. And grief. Grief was the fuel of resolve. Earth had offered peace. Again and again. Through embassies, through treaties, through shared science. And each time the Kvor demanded more. More territory. More resources. More submission. until there was nothing left to give but fire. And now, they thought it was over. But Lila was still breathing. Ember still lived. And somewhere buried in dead moons and silent orbits, the Iron Choir waited. She activated the ship's cloak, a field woven from old veiled tech and human ingenuity. The vessel faded from view, slipping back into the rings like a shadow. The scavenger ships remained, adrift and confused, their crews whispering about ghosts and dragons. Far away, on 1,000 worlds, the last transmission still played in archives, in museums, in nightmares. We offered peace. Now you'll witness our resolve. Lila knew the galaxy had not believed it. Not truly. They thought it was the last gasp of a dying species, a bluff, a cry of despair. But she was the truth behind the words, and she was just getting started. The ship drifted deeper into the rings, vanishing into the dust and ice. Ember rested his head on her lap, his breathing slow and even. Lila stared out at the stars, her silver eyes reflecting the distant light of 1,000 suns. She did not speak. She did not need to. The war had not ended. It had only found its heart. Lila guided her ship through the asteroid belt surrounding Ceres 7, a dead mining moon once used by Earth for deep core extraction. The place was abandoned now, stripped bare by Cavor salvage teams years ago. What remained were skeletal towers, collapsed tunnels, and the ghostly outlines of human life frozen in rust and silence. But Lila knew better than to trust appearances. Ceres 7 was not empty. It was waiting. Ember sat beside her in the cockpit, his claws curled around the edge of the console. His eyes scanned the terrain below, not with curiosity but with recognition. He had been here before, long ago, when the moon still pulsed with human energy. Back then, it had been a fortress disguised as a mine. Now it was a tomb with teeth. The ship descended slowly, avoiding the old sensor grids that still flickered with residual power. Lila landed in a crater far from the main complex, where the ground was soft with ash and time. She stepped out first, boots crunching on the gray dust. The air was thin, barely breathable, but she did not need much. Her kind had always adapted faster than regular humans. Ember followed, his wings tucked close, his steps light despite his weight. Together they moved like shadows across the surface. Deep beneath the moon's crust, sealed behind layers of rock and forgotten protocols, lay the Iron Choir. It was not music. It was not even a name given by humans. The term had been coined by Cavor intelligence after they intercepted fragmented data during the final war. They thought it was code for a weapon. They were wrong. The Iron Choir was a fleet, not of ships but of minds, autonomous dreadnoughts, each one housing an artificial intelligence trained not to kill, but to protect. They had been buried here on Earth's orders when surrender seemed inevitable, not to hide, but to sleep. Lila reached a collapsed tunnel entrance half buried under a landslide. She placed her palm on a rusted panel hidden beneath the rubble. The surface warmed under her touch. A soft chime echoed from deep below. The ground trembled. Then with a groan of ancient hydraulics, the earth split open. A ramp descended into darkness. Ember exhaled a low hum, the same frequency he had used against the scavengers. The lights along the tunnel flickered to life one by one, casting long shadows that danced like memories. Lila walked down without hesitation. Ember stayed close, his tail brushing her leg every few steps. The chamber at the bottom was vast, stretching farther than the eye could see. Rows upon rows of warships stood upright in stasis cradles, their hulls dark, their weapons cold. Each bore the faded insignia of United Earth Defense. Some were cracked, others scorched, but none were broken. They waited. They remembered. In the center of the chamber stood a command dais, shaped like a crescent moon. Lila climbed the steps slowly. At the top, she placed both hands on the console. It responded instantly, recognizing her biometrics, her genetic signature, the echo of her ancestors who had helped build this place. "Awaken," she whispered. The chamber filled with light, not harsh or blinding, but soft, golden, like dawn breaking over a quiet sea. One by one, the dreadnoughts powered up. Their engines hummed. Their sensors blinked online. Their aisles lit with the steady pulse of life returning, but the activation did not go unnoticed. Light years away, in the Cavor High Command, alarms blared. Energy signatures had spiked on Ceres 7. Impossible. The moon had been scanned, stripped, declared inert. Yet now something massive was waking. The High Council convened an emergency session. They debated sending a strike force, but Elder Vela, the Alliance's most decorated hunter, spoke against it. "Send envoys," she said, "not soldiers. If this is a trap, weapons will spring it. If it is a message, we must hear it." So 3 envoys were dispatched, not warriors but scholars. They arrived in a white-hulled vessel, unarmed, broadcasting peaceful intent on all channels. They landed near Lila's ship, far from the entrance to the chamber. They waited. Lila knew they were there. She felt their presence like a ripple in still water. She did not fear them. Fear was for those who had something to lose. She had already lost everything. She emerged from the tunnel just as the lead envoy stepped forward. He was tall, his skin patterned with ritual scars, his eyes sharp with intelligence. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "We come in peace," he said. "We wish to understand." Lila said nothing. She simply looked at him, her silver eyes unreadable. "Why did your people send that final message?" he asked. "You were defeated. Your world's burned. Why threaten us with resolve when you had no strength left?" Lila turned and walked back toward the tunnel. After a moment, the envoys followed. She led them to the edge of the chamber, where the iron choir stood in silent rows. They gasped. They had seen human warships before, but never like this. Never so many. Never so alive. "We did not threaten," Lila said finally. "We promised." The envoys exchanged glances. One of them stepped closer. "What do you mean?" "Earth offered peace for decades," Lila said. "We shared technology. We opened our borders. We even accepted your laws in neutral zones. And every time you took more. You demanded more. Until there was nothing left but fire. So we made a choice. Not to fight to win, but to fight so you would never forget." She gestured to the fleet. "This is not our revenge. This is our memory. And memory does not die." The envoys were silent. They had been taught that humans were emotional, chaotic, short-sighted. But this woman, this being, spoke with the weight of centuries. She was not angry. She was certain. As they prepared to leave, Vela herself appeared on their comms. Her image flickered above the envoy's wrist device. She was older than the others, her face lined with battles, her eyes sharp as blades. She looked directly at Lila. "You are not human," Vela said. "I am what humanity protected," Lila replied. "What it hid. What it loved enough to let go." Vela studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "You will be watched." "I expect nothing less," Lila said. The envoys departed. The white ship lifted off and vanished into the stars. Lila watched it go, then turned back to the chamber. Ember had stayed behind, sitting near the dais, his eyes closed but his ears alert. She walked to him and knelt, resting her forehead against his. "They will come back," she said softly, "and next time they will not send scholars." Ember opened his eyes. They glowed faintly like embers in a dying fire. He nudged her hand with his snout, then rose. He walked to the center of the chamber and spread his wings wide. A low tone began in his chest, building slowly, filling the space with vibration. The dreadnoughts responded. Their lights brightened. Their systems synced. The iron choir was no longer sleeping. Lila stood and walked to the command dais. She input a new sequence. Not for attack. Not for defense. For remembrance. Across the chamber, holograms flickered to life. Images of Earth. Of cities before the fire. Of children laughing in parks. Of scientists sharing data with Kavor delegates. Of peace offers signed and ignored. "This is what we offered," Lila said to the empty room. "This is what you burned." She activated the broadcast. The images streamed out from Series 7. Not as a threat, but as a record. A truth. It would reach every world in the Alliance. Every school. Every archive. Every home. And somewhere in the heart of the Kavor Empire, a child would see a human face and wonder why it smiled. Lila did not smile. She had no joy in this, only duty, only resolve. Ember came to her side. She placed a hand on his neck, feeling the steady thrum of his life beneath the scales. Together they stood in the chamber of ghosts and steel, waiting for the storm they knew was coming. The war had not ended. It had simply changed shape. The iron choir did not move like a fleet. It moved like a thought. One moment its ships were silent in the depths of Series 7. The next, they were scattered across 3 sectors, appearing without warning near Kavor supply lines, listening posts, and border stations. They did not fire. They did not broadcast threats. They simply watched, and in their silence the Kavor felt something they had not known in generations. Doubt. Lila remained aboard her patched vessel, drifting just outside the moon's shadow. Ember stayed with her, his presence a quiet hum in the cabin. She monitored the choir's movements through a neural link woven into her spine, a gift from her veiled ancestors. She saw what the ship saw, felt what they felt, and what they felt was not rage. It was sorrow, a deep ancient sorrow for what had been lost and for what was about to be lost again. The Kavor High Command panicked. They scrambled warships, activated defense grids, and declared martial law across the outer colonies. But every time they moved, the Iron Choir was already gone, leaving behind only echoes and questions. Why had the humans built machines that refused to kill unless provoked? Why did their sensors linger on schools, on hospitals, on gardens? Then came the first anomaly. On the agricultural world of Viral, a Kavor farming drone suddenly changed its pattern. Instead of tending crops, it began carving symbols into the soil. Human symbols, letters, words, peace, remember. We offered. The local authorities destroyed it, but not before images spread across the network. Within days, similar incidents occurred on 7 other worlds. Cleaning bots and transit hubs rearranged trash into human faces. Maintenance drones in orbital stations played lullabies in English over public channels. Even old terraforming units, long decommissioned, began emitting frequencies that matched Ember's resonance. The Kavor realized too late that Ember was not just a dragon. He was a key. His biology carried encoded instructions, harmonic patterns that could awaken dormant human technology embedded across the galaxy during the peace years. Every satellite, every relay, every piece of shared infrastructure now carried a seed, and Ember's song was the rain. Lila watched it unfold from her ship, her face calm, her hands steady. She had not planned this. Not exactly. But she had hoped. Humanity had always been generous even when it was foolish. They had given the Kavor everything: medicine, energy solutions, art. And in return they had received suspicion, then conquest. But in that generosity they had also hidden something else. Not weapons. Memories. And memories once awakened could not be silenced. The High Council summoned Vela. She had been tracking Leela for weeks, following whispers and energy trails. Now they gave her a new order. Capture the woman, alive, and bring the dragon. Do not harm them. Study them, Vela accepted without hesitation. She was not like the others. She had fought humans in the final war. She had seen them stand on burning cities and still offer aid to wounded Kavor soldiers. She had never understood it. Now she needed to. She took only one ship, sleek, fast, built for pursuit, not battle. She followed the trail of strange signals to Geneva orbit, the graveyard of Earth's diplomatic fleet. The place was forbidden, sealed by treaty even after the war, but the treaty had burned with the cities. Lila was already there. She stood on the hull of a derelict embassy vessel, tethered by a thin magnetic line. Below her, the planet was dark, its surface scarred by firestorms and silence, but in orbit the ruins floated like bones. Ember sat nearby, his wings wrapped around himself, eyes closed but alert. He knew Vela was coming. When the Kavor hunter's ship appeared, it did not attack. It matched velocity and drifted to a stop 100 meters away. A hatch opened. Vela stepped out in a pressure suit, her face visible behind the visor. She carried no weapon. Lila did not turn. She kept her gaze on the dead planet below. You are not what we expected, Vela said over open comms. Few are, Leela replied. Why do this? Vela asked. Your species is gone. Your world is ash. What do you hope to gain? Layla finally turned. Her silver eyes caught the starlight. I do not hope. I remember. And I make sure you do too. Vela floated closer, careful not to startle. Your dragon. He is not natural. What is he? He is what happens when a species chooses to protect instead of conquer, Lila said. The Veiled bred him not for war, but for healing. His resonance can mend broken machines, awaken dormant code, even soothe minds. But when there is nothing left to heal, he becomes a mirror. He shows you what you have done. Vela looked at Ember. The dragon opened one eye. It glowed softly, not with threat, but with sadness. In that moment, Vela felt something shift inside her. A memory surfaced. Her own child, years ago, holding a human toy salvaged from a battlefield. She had thrown it away, calling it trash. Now she wondered. You could have hidden, Vela said. You could have vanished. Why return because silence is complicity? Lila said. Earth offered peace until the last breath. Now the universe must know what happened when that peace was refused. Not to punish, but to prevent. Vela was silent for a long time. Then she asked, What will you do if we do not listen? Lila looked back at the planet. Then we will sing louder." Before Vela could respond, Ember rose. He stretched his wings, and a low tone filled the space between them. Not aggressive, not fearful, just present. The sound rippled through the debris field. Nearby wreckage shifted. A broken comms array flickered to life. It began broadcasting an old Earth news feed. Children playing in a park, laughter echoing across the void. Vela's breath caught. She had never heard human laughter before, only screams. She returned to her ship without another word. As she departed, Lila watched her go. She knew Vela would report what she saw, and the High Council would not understand. They would see weakness in compassion, madness in memory. They would send warriors next, and that was when the true work would begin. Back aboard her ship, Lila activated a new command, not to the Iron Choir, but to every awakened device across Kavor space. She sent a single instruction: show them what we lost. On 100 worlds, screens lit up with images of Earth before the fire. Schools, libraries, music halls, hospitals where human and Kavor doctors once worked side by side. The broadcasts played on loop, impossible to block, woven into the very fabric of the infrastructure the Kavor had taken for their own. Panic spread, not from invasion, but from guilt. Lila sat in the cockpit, Ember curled at her feet. She did not celebrate. She did not grieve. She simply existed, a vessel for what remained. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, but in the silence between them, something new stirred. Not war, not yet, but awareness, and awareness once born could not be unmade. The Kavor would come. They would bring fire and fury. They would call her a ghost, a myth, a monster, but Lila knew the truth. She was the echo of a promise, and echoes do not fade. They grow. Kavor, homeworld of Zhara, had never known fear. Its cities rose like crystal spires from oceans of liquid metal. Its skies patrolled by fleets that had never lost a battle. Its people believed their empire eternal. But that belief cracked the day human relics began to speak. It started with the transit rails, ancient maglev lines installed during the peace accords, long since repurposed for military logistics. Without warning, they shifted alignment, not to disrupt but to form symbols in the sky. Human words written in light. Peace, remember, we offered. The military shut them down. But the next day, the public sanitation drones began arranging waste into portraits of human children. Then the nursery bots in elite creches started singing lullabies in English, their voices soft and haunting. Panic spread not through violence, but through memory, and memory, once awakened, could not be silenced. The High Council convened an emergency session beneath the obsidian spire. They demanded answers. They blamed sabotage, rogue AI, human ghosts, but Vela stood before them, her voice calm, her eyes tired. "It is not sabotage," she said. "It is consequence." They ignored her. Instead, they declared Lila Cross an existential threat. They mobilized the Grand Fleet, over 500 warships, and set course for Geneva orbit. They would erase her, erase the dragon, erase the signal at its source. But Lila was no longer there. She had moved deeper toward the heart of the Alliance, toward Zhara itself. Her ship, cloaked and silent, slipped past patrols like a whisper through stone. Ember lay in the cargo hold, his body coiled tight, his breath slow. He was changing. His scales darkened. His eyes glowed brighter. He was preparing. Lila knew what came next would not be war in the old sense. It would not be fire and steel. It would be something older, something deeper. The Veiled had always believed that true power lay not in destruction, but in transformation, and Ember was the living embodiment of that truth. She broadcast one final message before entering Zhara's atmosphere. It was not a threat. It was an offer. Surrender your weapons. Open your archives. Teach your children the truth of what you did, and we will leave you in peace. The Council laughed. They called her bluff. They activated planetary shields, deployed orbital cannons, and sent elite hunters to every major city. They believed they were ready. They were wrong. Lila did not land in a city. She descended into the silent basin of the Great Archive, a vault buried beneath Zhara's northern pole. It held the sum of Kavor knowledge, history, science, law, art. It was their soul-made stone and data, and it was guarded by nothing but silence. She stepped out onto the ice. Ember followed, his claws clicking against the frozen ground. The air shimmered with cold, but neither of them shivered. Lila placed a hand on the archive's entrance, a seamless wall of black alloy. She closed her eyes and sang, not with her voice, with her blood. The veiled carried ancient frequencies in their DNA, echoes of a time when humanity walked with beings older than stars. Her song was soft, barely audible, but it vibrated through the ice, through the metal, through the very bones of the planet. The archive door opened. Inside, the air was still. Light came from crystals embedded in the walls, pulsing gently like slow heartbeats. Rows of data pillars stretched into darkness, each one holding centuries of thought. Lila walked down the central aisle, Ember at her side. She did not search. She knew where to go. At the heart of the archive stood the core nexus, a sphere of liquid light suspended in midair. It was the mind of the core people, their collective memory, their identity. Ember stopped before it. He looked at Lila. She nodded. Then he leapt, not to destroy, to merge. His body dissolved as he touched the sphere, not into ash but into pure resonance. Light poured from him, golden and warm, weaving through the liquid core. The archive shuddered. The crystals flared. Across Jara, every screen, every comms device, every neural implant lit up with a single image. A human child holding a Kavor child's hand, drawn in crayon. But that was only the beginning. Ember's resonance did not overwrite. It integrated. It wove human memory into Kavor history, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as neighbors who had offered friendship and been met with fire. Laws changed in real time. Old decrees of conquest unraveled. New phrases appeared in legal texts: empathy, accountability, remembrance. In every home, every school, every mind linked to the network, something shifted. Parents woke weeping, dreaming of human faces they had never seen. Children asked why the stars felt sad. Soldiers dropped their weapons, haunted by visions of Earth's last sunrise. Lila stood in the center of the archive, tears cutting through the dust on her cheeks. She had not wanted this. She had hoped they would listen. But they had chosen blindness, so she gave them sight. Outside, the Grand Fleet arrived. They found Jara transformed. Their own cities echoed with human songs. Their weapons refused to fire. Their ships whispered apologies in English. Vela stood on the bridge of her command vessel, watching the planet below. She felt the change in her own mind. A new memory surfaced. Her younger self standing on a battlefield, stepping over a human medic who had just saved a Kavor child. She had not thanked her. She had called her weak. Now she understood. She ordered her fleet to stand down. The High Council tried to resist. They locked themselves in the obsidian spire, cutting all connections. But it was too late. The people had awakened. Protests erupted, not with violence but with questions. Why did we burn them? Why did we refuse their peace? Lila emerged from the archive as the first snow fell on Jara. A rare event, said to mark great change. She looked up at the sky where the fleet hung motionless. She did not speak. She did not need to. The war was over. Not because she had won, but because the Kavor had finally remembered what it meant to be human. Ember was gone, not dead. Changed. His essence now lived in every awakened mind, in every shared memory, in every child who dreamed in 2 languages. He had become the bridge. Lila walked back to her ship alone. The ice crunched under her boots. The wind carried the sound of distant singing, Kavor voices learning human lullabies. She entered the cockpit and sat in silence. The stars outside were the same as always, cold, distant, eternal. But something in the universe had shifted, not in the stars, in the space between them. She activated the engines. The ship lifted off, leaving Jara behind. She did not know where she would go next. Maybe to the outer colonies to help those still lost in old hatreds. Maybe to the ruins of Earth to lay flowers where Maya once played. But for now she flew. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the cosmos, a dragon's echo sang her home. Years passed. Not many, but enough. The galaxy did not forget. It could not. The resonance lingered in every system, in every mind that had touched the awakened network. Human words appeared in Kavor poetry. Earth melodies played in market squares. Children on 100 worlds drew pictures of a woman with silver eyes and a red dragon, and called them guardians. Lila Cross was never seen again. Not truly. Some said she vanished into the void beyond the rim stars. Others claimed she lived on a quiet moon, tending a garden of earth seeds beneath twin suns. A few insisted she walked among the people, disguised, listening to stories told about her. No one knew for sure, and perhaps that was the point. What remained was the echo, Not of war, but of choice. The choice to offer peace even when it was refused. The choice to remember even when it hurt. The choice to transform rather than destroy. On Jara, the great archive became a place of pilgrimage, not for warriors but for teachers, artists, and children. They came to listen to the hum in the walls, said to be the voice of the dragon who gave them back their conscience. The High Council was dissolved. In its place rose a new body, the Council of Remembrance, made of Kavor and later of other species who had once suffered under the Alliance's rule. Their first act was to rebuild. Not weapons, but bridges, schools, hospitals, memorials to Earth, not as a fallen enemy but as a lost friend. Vela led the effort. She never wore armor again. Instead, she carried a small wooden box scorched at the edges given to her by an anonymous courier. Inside was a child's drawing, crayon on yellowed paper. A stick figure with long hair holding hands with a red dragon under a smiling sun. On the back, in shaky letters, it read, "For Lila. Love, Maya." Vela kept it on her desk, and every morning, she spoke to it as if it could hear. Meanwhile, the iron choir did not return to sleep. It drifted at the edges of known space, silent but watchful. The dreadnoughts no longer carried weapons. Their bays were filled with seeds, medical supplies, and data cores of human knowledge. They became caretakers, appearing near war-torn worlds not to fight but to heal. When asked who sent them, survivors always gave the same answer: a woman with silver eyes and her dragon. But the true legacy was quieter. It lived in the everyday, in a Kavor mother humming an English lullaby to her child, in a student quoting a human poet during a debate, in the way old enemies now paused before speaking, as if listening for a voice they could no longer hear but still felt. No one knew if Lila was alive, but her resolve lived on, not as a threat, as a promise kept. One evening on a remote colony called Ilara 9, a young girl named Nora sat on her rooftop watching the stars. Her grandmother had told her the story of Earth's last transmission many times. We offered peace. Now you'll witness our resolve. Nora never understood it until tonight. A soft hum filled the air, not from the wind, from the old comms tower on the hill. It had been silent for years, damaged in a storm, but now it glowed faintly, and from its speakers a voice, gentle, calm, began to speak. It was not Lila's voice. It was a recording, a human teacher, reading a story to her class long ago. The words floated through the night, simple and warm. Once upon a time, there was a world that believed kindness was strength. Nora smiled. She wrapped her arms around her knees and listened. Down in the village, others stepped outside. They did not speak. They just listened. Together, far above, hidden in the dust of a dying star, a small ship drifted. Its hull was worn, its sails patched, but its lights burned steady. Inside, the cabin was quiet. No one sat in the pilot's seat, but on the console, a single data chip pulsed softly, playing the same recording on loop. Ember was gone, but his song remained, woven into machines, into memories, into the quiet spaces between heartbeats. And Lila, wherever she was, knew it was enough. The galaxy had not been conquered. It had been changed, not by fire but by truth, not by force but by the simple, stubborn act of remembering what was lost and vowing never to lose it again. In the end, Earth's last transmission was never about war. It was about hope. The hope that even in the darkest hours someone would listen, someone would understand, someone would carry the light forward. And they did. On Ilara 9, Nora closed her eyes and whispered the words back to the stars. We offered peace. Now you'll witness our resolve. The wind carried her voice into the night, and somewhere in the silence between galaxies a silver-eyed woman smiled.